Yeah, hi everyone. We are back again. We are back again with another insightful session for all of you. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all those who joined us. I welcome you all to today's session on how CTOs are evolving ERP from systems of records to enterprise digital platforms. Once again, thank you all for joining us. We don't want to keep you much waiting on the sessions that we have for all of you. So I want to start by saying that ERP is no longer judged only by stability or compliance or back office efficiency. In 2026, CTOs are increasingly expected to transform ERP into a strategic digital platform that connects data, workflows, intelligence, and enterprise ecosystems at scale. In today's analyst-led session, we'll explore why traditional ERP architectures are becoming execution bottlenecks, how leading organizations are adopting composable and API-first approaches, and what platform thinking really means for ERP modernization moving forward. Well, I'm pleased to inform or pleased to introduce you to speakers today. That is Sanjeevi C. Ramachandran, VP and Lead Analyst here at QKS Group. Along with him, we have Sujan Thomas Matthew, Practice Director here at QKS Group. Together, they will share practical insights on how ERP is evolving into a core enterprise digital platform and what technology leaders should prioritize next. We encourage all of you to raise any queries that you may have throughout the session in the Q&A section below, and we'll surely address those towards the end of the session. With that, let's get started, and over to you, Sanjeevi.
Thank you so much, Anish. So I've been tracking ERP platform transformation very closely through our Spark Matrix research and advisory work here at QKS. So the conversation that I want to have today is not about which ERP to choose. It's about more on something that's on the practical side, and that is whether your ERP in your organization, is it capable of functioning as an enterprise platform, or is it still a system of record because your business strategy has moved on uh, and requires more agility. So most of the CTOs who walk into 2026 are dealing with three compounding pressures, which are simultaneous and parallel. And business units want to speed up ERP, which the ERP was not designed to deliver. So along with that, there are some AI initiatives that are stalling at the data layer. Everybody, there are a lot of people dealing with this. And lastly, the integration layer around ERP has become the most fragile or the most fixed part in the enterprise stack. So the shift that we are describing today is not an ERP evolution. It's not an ERP roadmap. It is about repositioning your ERP within the enterprise architecture. So this is the aim of for us to be going through all the slides, and we'll be explaining it step by step uh, in the coming slides. So before we begin, a quick note on the format. This is a structured analyst session, so please make sure that you write down your questions, and it'll be taken up towards the end from by Anish. And yeah, so the entire webinar has been structured in such a way that we first uh, talk about the major dilemma that is there with CTOs right now in 2026. And this is what we have been seeing when we are having conversations with end users most of the time in 2026. Moving on to the second slide, where we'll be describing a little bit about what ERP is as a platform. So when we are saying as a system of record versus a platform, what are we trying to say here? Next slide, we'll be talking about 5 capability shifts, which are basically 5 pillars of the architecture, and we'll be looking at how this has moved on in 2026, followed by an operating model designed for specifically for a CTO, followed by the AI urgency conversation that's been having in going on in multiple meetings, And lastly, and moving on to the diagnostic questions provided by Sanjeevi, who has around 25-30 years experience in ERP transformation. And lastly, we'll talk about what are the practical steps that a CTO should take and what's the CTO mandate for 2026. So when we talk about the dilemma, you would have guessed it when I spoke about, and Anish gave us a brief introduction of what we are going to talk about in this webinar. And that is that an ERP looked at as a system of record is no longer the way ERP should be visualized. ERP in 2026 has to function like a digital platform. So what does that mean? ERP has always been the operational backbone for the enterprise, and which means that all the business conversations, all the workflows has to go through ERP at some point. So the problem is that the business speed has multiplied exponentially in the past couple of years and will do so moving forward. So the gap is whether ERP was designed for the speed or not. So although ERP itself is stable, the enterprise around it is not. The gap is where the competitive disadvantage accumulates over a period of time, and then ERP becomes a problem than a solution. So in the first card, we are talking about customization as a constraint. So that means that every modification made over the past couple of years has been made to add on to the capabilities of an ERP, but it's also accumulating technical debt. Upgrades eventually become slow and expensive, not because ERP is a poor technology, because the layers built around its core has made the system inaccessible. ERP is no longer belonging to the vendor roadmap, is what I'm trying to say. It belongs to the organization's workarounds. So the customization as a constraint, it has to be visualized in that manner. So what does this lead on to? So that's the second card. That is, integration was never designed as an architecture. So the connections between ERP and the surrounding systems was built to solve individual problems, like we mentioned in card 1, and collectively they are not governed in the enterprise layer. So every new capability added adds to another dependency to the infrastructure. Lastly, the conversation around AI, is blocked because AI is not readily available because of inaccessible data. So what does the enterprise AI require? It requires a data that is clean, accessible, and updated in real time. Legacy ERP architectures are optimized for transaction processes, not data activation. So this is the major gap. And that is why, although many customers are looking at AI, and AI is not a hype, they are not able to realize the execution potential that AI has because the data is not clean, real time, and therefore inaccessible. So the problem that we see at QKS is across enterprise environments. Now I want to bring in Sanjeevi, who'd give an analyst definition of how to look at ERP moving forward. Sanjeevi.
So thank you, Sujan, and thank you, Anish, for the fine introduction. And before we talk about how enterprises execute this shift, right? So I think we first need a very precise definition in terms of what we are actually shifting towards. Shift is one, but what we are shifting towards is the primary thing. Because when you look at it very frankly, the term digital platform has actually become one of those phrases the market uses for almost everything. Every single vendor uses that. Okay. So it goes like this. If a company adds APIs, wow, it has become a platform. If they launch a mobile app, platform. If they change the UI color from blue to red and add AI somewhere in the presentation, and suddenly it becomes a AI-powered enterprise platform. Okay. And so at QKS, we wanted to define this in a way that is structurally testable. The definition that QKS Group gives is very simple. A system of record captures what happened. A digital platform actually governs what happens next. And this is the distinction that we need to focus, giving it due importance, okay? Because this is not about whether the system is on-premise, cloud, SaaS, hybrid, multi-cloud, or whatever new cloud category vendors invent in the next quarter. So there has been, ideally, I should say, there has been the number of cloud platforms are going to become more than the number of ERPs in the market, if this is the way it's going to continue. And but yeah, let's look at the real distinction. So the real distinction is actually where this execution control in an ERP sits in the enterprise architecture, or keep the ERP away. Where is the execution control sitting inside the ERP architecture, which is the shift we are talking about, right? So if you look at the first row here, the control layer, this is where the architectural conversation actually becomes serious. In a traditional system of record model, right, the ERP owns the processes within its own boundary. Finance processes stays within finance. Supply chain stays within supply chain. HR stays within HR. And integration happens between these different systems. But if you look at a platform model, control sits above individual applications. The overall platform actually orchestrates the execution across the enterprise. And what does it mean? It means that the workflows, decisions, intelligence, integrations, including operational triggers, are not confined to any one application boundary. So which means what? We are not looking at a feature enhancement. We are actually talking about structural redesign of enterprise control. So that's the first shift. The second shift is around data. And this is where many enterprises actually are still confused, are confused storage with activation. A system of record stores data in a fantastic manner. In fact, ERP systems are exceptionally good at transactional integrity. Whether it is auditability, compliance, and financial correctness, they are the best. But nobody wants their general ledger improvising creatively with AI, right? I mean, just imagine if you allow your AI to keep improvising your general ledger, and we know where the organization will end up. So storing data and activating data are architecturally two different responsibilities, which is what the enterprises need to understand. A platform actually activates the data in context, in real time, across multiple functions, without requiring a new extraction project every single time the business asks a new question. And frankly, this is where a lot of CTO organizations are currently feeling the strain, because the business expects real-time intelligence, while the architecture still behaves like a monthly reporting cycle. I mean, there is a huge gap you could see there, right? So now let's get into the change model. So we have all been hearing one phrase very repeatedly in the market now: clean core. And there is a reason for that. I mean, so historically, enterprises modified ERP cores extensively to support business differentiation. What happened after that? What was the result? Every upgrade became a multi-month negotiation with reality. There was a fight that ensued with reality, between reality and upgrade, probably I would say, and sometime with consulting invoices, because people will have to come in to tell you that reality is different from your upgrade, right? So yeah, somebody was making money there. And in the platform model, extensions move outside the core. Innovations actually happen through APIs. You have configuration layers, you have orchestration services and modular capabilities where your ERP core remains stable. And it is very, very important because the enterprise can now absorb the vendor innovation continuously instead of treating every single upgrade like a major transformation program. Right? So let's move into the intelligence layer now. Now, the intelligence layer is where this becomes even more interesting because traditional reporting is retrospective. This just tells you what happened. I mean, this is what we spoke about earlier, right? A system of record. It just tells you what happened. And embedded intelligence actually shapes what happened next at the exact point of execution, which is where your ERP is a digital platform and not just a system of record. And this requires a completely different architectural mindset because AI is not valuable simply because a dashboard exists. AI becomes operationally meaningful only and only when intelligence is embedded directly into the workflows, into the decisions, approvals, recommendations, insight, exceptions, and execution paths. This is why the data and integration layer, which Susan described in the earlier slide actually becomes foundational to this shift. That is the foundation that is going to effectively convert or transform an ERP from being a system of record to a digital. I'm sorry, was there a question?
No.
Okay. So I would like to take a small pause on the final row because this is actually the organizational shift that is hiding underneath the technology conversation. This is where the CTO's role, the role itself changes. And we are not talking about managing enterprise systems anymore. We are talking about governing an enterprise platform ecosystem. We have gone beyond the platform itself, right? So which means that managing enterprise systems and governing an enterprise platform ecosystem are very different jobs, which means CTO's role has just evolved. So one of these is an administration role at scale. The other is enterprise orchestration. Governing is about enterprise orchestration. And the first role, which I said, right, about managing enterprise systems, that helps you optimize application as a CTO. And the other governs the enterprise execution. And I want to make one very important point in an explicit manner before we move forward. ERP does not disappear in this model. This is not a rip and replace conversation. We are not doing that. ERP continues doing what ERP does exceptionally well, whether it is transaction processing, financial integrity, compliance, audit governance. It's like this. I mean, there's no difference between people and systems when it comes to this specific aspect, right? It is all about the expectations you have from ERP, you have on ERP. The platform layer above it carries orchestration, data activation, intelligence, and cross-enterprise execution. And frankly, one of the biggest and the most critical architectural mistakes that enterprises make today is asking ERP to carry both the jobs simultaneously, which is what is the problem. I would hand over the next slide to Sujan for us to for him to throw more light in terms of where we are heading next.
Yep. Thank you, Sanjeevi. In this slide, we are looking a little bit deeper into the architecture and the different layers of the platform. So you can understand technology shift specifically with respect to the technology layers. So in the last slide, we provided you with a mindset to which you have to approach this entire conversation. So as Sanjeevi mentioned, governance is a very important thing. And here we are taking it to the next stage as to understand layer by layer what are the different kinds of shifts that are happening. So the platform transformation is not a single implementation program. It's 5 capability shifts or 5 layer shifts that has to advance together. So moving one without the other provides a modernized system, but not a platform. So the most ERP modernization programs usually underdeliver because this major mistake has been made. So all the 5 shifts must move together, and governance is not the outcome of the platform transformation. It is the prerequisite. So the point here uh, that should be attached to digital platform is governance. Let's look at the first row, that is the architecture layer. So initially it's legacy, customized core to clean core and API first. The clean core is the operative concept in 2026. And this means that keeping ERP close to the vendor standard, extending through configuration and governed API modules, and not just through code modification. Upgrades become manageable and innovation can be absorbed without a program. So here we are looking at the mindset with which we have to approach architecture, not as a solution by customization, but making sure that the architecture itself is agile to add on new programs to the architecture. Next is a point-to-point unmanaged connections to a governed integration layer is another segment that we have to look at from a governance standpoint. Most organizations underinvest in integration, and it's a very important misstep that they take. Integration is not a project output, it's infrastructure, and it needs a permanent ownership. So in multiple conversations across the entire webinar, we'll be talking about ownership, and governance only comes through ownership, through defined standards, and does not dissolve when the implementation program closes. So this is where the CTO ownership comes in. Additionally, ERP also owns the data, okay, which might be siloed by module to an enterprise data layer, where ERP is one governed source among several. So the word governed is again deliberate, because making data accessible without governance creates compliance and integrity risks. So data is to be managed in such a way so as to avoid risk. And managing data with a very structured format makes the entirety of the data accessible to multiple layers, including AI, which Sanjeev we talked about in the last slide. So the intelligence layer is where the AI and analytics functions usually stay in. The analytics as a separate bolt-on layer to AI embedded in execution workflows is what we are looking at. This shift cannot happen without data and integration shifts that occurred first. Okay. And this sequential mindset is something you have to remember, because we'll be talking about this in the coming slides. So you would realize that the importance of why it's sequential and parallel at the same time, so that the entire enterprise resource planning platform evolves together. Lastly, governance. Governance is the control in the code and customization, and is policy driven. So when we are saying governance, it is with the mindset that we are talking about policy driven, enforced outside the ERP core. So this is the fifth shift, but it is one of the most important part of the transformation. This is what makes sure that it's not just a more modernized system, but a digital platform at the end of the transformation. So one point to make sure that we are every CTO should remember is that like Sanjeevi mentioned in the last slide, conversations cannot be with respect to managing requirements anymore for the CTO. It has to go with the ownership of the governance of the entire ERP platform. Governance has to take an owner before the architecture has a roadmap. So moving on to the next slide, these 5 shifts in the platform, the different layers within the technology stack itself, is what provides the change that the ownership, the conversations around the role of CTO requires. In the next slide, we'll be talking about what are these new responsibilities that the CTO has to take to make sure that the governance is entirely looked at from the CTO perspective so that the ERP functions as a digital platform. So when we say you are a platform owner, we would have already you would have understood we are already talking about not just from an ERP as a system point of view, it's architecture, data, intelligence, all the layers, the 5 layers that we talked about in the previous one. So the governance happens throughout the entire 5 segments, including the data model, the integration standards, and extensibility framework. The reason being that only when all of these capabilities move hand in hand does commercial output come in a way that was, the output could be predicted based on the parallel working of these 5 capabilities. So this is what makes sure that the conversation is no longer ERP as a platform, but ERP as a system. So through this, you would have kind of understood that, the multiple functions within the platform itself also has to be managed. So that's what takes us to the next card, that is cross-functional broker. So this particularly means that, a CTO is not having conversations on, managing tickets raised by finance, supply chain, HR, or from the operation side. It's more on understanding the commercial requirements first, and then making sure that the governance happens throughout the entire functions from the commercial point of view. So that requires a different kind of relationship with peer leaders and a different kind of presence at the executive table. So this is the shift in responsibility. The last part is a little bit about what we talked about in the last slide, which is a CTO cannot just be managing separate modules or separate systems, making sure that the system is working well. No. CTO has to also work as a transformation sequencer. So the CTO holds the cloud migration, the integration, consolidation, data governance, and therefore leading to AI enablement. So if there's a break or there are some problems in the previous sequences, the AI enablement will not happen. So when we are having conversations or discussions around AI and the problems related to AI, we have to make sure in the back of our mind that all the previous layers, that is cloud migration, integration, consolidation, and data governance, is working very well. And only then can we measure the output of AI, which you have added on to the entire digital platform. So before we move on to the next layer, we have let's just look at some of the parts within each of the cards. Anish, the previous slide. Yeah. So ERP is no longer an IT system, it is an enterprise infrastructure. So you realize that all the 5 capabilities have to work parallelly. The next is that it's no longer about upgrades, it's about capability evolution, again, working in parallel. IT no longer owns the roadmap. It's the CTO which governs business outcomes. So there's a major change here. It's no longer about system conversations. It's about business conversations. And lastly, customization to fit the business is a wrong kind of mindset for when you are dealing with a digital platform. It's supposed to be a clean core, configuration based, and the conversations should be around composability. So then ERP platform ownership cannot be delegated to a system administrator or an implementation team. It has to be owned by the CTO from start to finish, and not just during the transformation phase, for continuous improvement and capability evolution also. So in this slide, we'll be looking at finally the AI conversation. So we dealt with the definition of the digital platform, and you have to understand that the mindset here is that AI is a part of execution. Okay, it is not a, kind of like a creative help desk partner, but it will help you provide the outcomes that you are looking for, and you don't have to waste time on the execution part anymore. It's only about review and push, right? So most enterprises are pursuing AI initiatives and ERP platform initiatives as separate programs and separate owners, along with separate timelines. So you understand now that this is not going to be taking place, and what is the problem with related to this kind of mindset. The AI roadmap and the ERP platform roadmap are the same document or the same conversation. Organizations treating them separately will find that one constrains the other at the point of deployment. So what we have to understand here is that the AI agenda is the ERP platform agenda. The entire management of data, intelligence, and everything that happens in the ERP digital platform helps in the execution, which is led by AI. So it's basically the same question and the same answer and the same conversations that we are having here. So what does AI provide, right? So there are three different kinds of outputs that we are looking at when we talk about AI, which is predictive intelligence, autonomous workflow execution, and natural language access, right? So predictive intelligence requires a unified data layer. A siloed ERP module data produces forecasting and anomaly detection that operates on incomplete inputs. So data is very important for the AI to execute on decisions. The output may look credible, but operationally it is unreliable, right? The next part is to make sure that the workflow execution is autonomous. And therefore, this conversation requires that a CTO works on the policies and it is governed at the integration layer. The AI agents which are deployed across unmanaged point-to-point integrations require custom connection work for every process. The efficiency the agent has designed to create is consumed by the infrastructure, and which is why we had this conversation as the first layer in the technology for the digital platform, which is the architecture itself. The last part is about making sure that the AI has access to natural language processing. So this improves the adoption, and you can basically talk to the AI in a normal language, your natural language, so that you don't have to click, a set of options which leads to a workflow. You can basically have a conversation with the AI providing with the right context, it would automatically execute based on your instructions. So basically what we are saying is that an ERP cannot support embedded AI if it's not a platform. It's an expensive liability with a modernization problem that grows every quarter, right? So here again, it's about the customizations and the integrations. So if those conversations or those problems are not dealt with, it just becomes a hyper modernized system of record. So you are still not reached a digital platform yet. The next slide is taken by Sanjeevi, who would like provide you with 6 diagnostic questions across various topics that we have discussed earlier. So this would provide you with an understanding of how should I approach ERP as a digital platform.
Great, thank you, Sujan. So Anish and Sujan and audience as well. So we are going to get as practical as possible with the slide, right? And these 6 questions are not meant to be a maturity checklist. They are not like rate yourself from 1 to 5, or it is not like congratulations, you are digitally transforming faster than your competitors. No, we are not doing that. In fact, on a lighter note, most enterprises already have enough maturity assessments, and if you print them, you can wallpaper an entire transformation office. So many maturity assessments have been done, right? So these questions we are talking about are actually architectural diagnostics. And the reason that matters is very, very simple, because transformation programs, in my experience, usually fails even before the implementation begins. Because a program starts with vendor selection, right? And that is actually backwards. Vendor selection only tells you what you can buy. The vendor selection never tells you what is structurally broken in your organization, where the execution friction exists, what sequence the change needs to happen in your organization, or where the organization is already building pressure for change internally. So I mean, your vendor selection process does not tell you that. This is inward, right? It is within your organization. And this is important because clarity is not about the preparation of the roadmap. Clarity is the roadmap. Your clarity is the roadmap for transformation. You cannot expect clarity after implementation. If that is the case, then the transformation is never going to happen. So let's quickly walk through these 6 questions. The first question is going to be, what are the processes that truly belong inside ERP? And what are those processes which are there because they ended up there over time? Over a period of time, they've ended up there, right? So this sounds like a simple question. It is not a simple question, because most organizations have intentionally never mapped this distinction. Because when you take an ERP over a period of time, over so many years, right? Processes get accumulated in this ERP over a period of time. So a customization starts leading to another customization. A workflow leads to another workflow. And then you get one more approval layer. And after a decade of all of this happening, right, your ERP will start looking more like an archaeological excavation and not like an architecture. You will end up excavating your processes, workflows, customizations, and you will not know what started when, why, who did it, how, for what purpose. Okay, so your discovery layers of decisions, or what? Okay, so the other way of putting it around is, you will find multiple layers of decisions that were made by people who's retired from the company or who's left 7 years ago. We'll still be running those processes. So this is where we need clarity, and that is why I say clarity is the roadmap. And from QKS VOC surveys and other research that we have done, we have consistently found that about roughly about 25 to 30% of ERP-owned processes do not actually need to live there anymore. They need to retire. They need to retire. I mean, no, they don't even get pension if we speak in human terms. They just need to retire, right? So that's how it is. And the moment you remove this unnecessary ownership, your customization complexity drops. Your integration dependencies actually reduce beyond your expectations, and your upgrade cycles become very, very easy. And platform flexibility improves immediately, which helps your CTO's role move from managing an enterprise system to effectively governing an enterprise system. So, and if I ask the audience something, right, how many of you have formally mapped these processes in terms of what belong inside ERP by design and what are those processes that are there because people just wanted it?
Yeah, I can see people raising their hands here.
Okay. Great. So good if that is done, because Anish, a complete silence would have itself become the diagnostic of what we have just said. And the second question is going to be even more realistic. Has your ERP created a specific constraint on a specific business decision in the last 12 months? I'm not asking where the ERP is generally slow. Every enterprise says ERP is slow. Okay. That is almost part of the ERP license agreement itself now. That ERP is going to be slow. It's almost become like that. What matters here is the specificity. A named business decision, a named stakeholder, a named delay or constraint, because that is the place where executive urgency is created. For example, a pricing change has been delayed by workflow rigidity. A supply chain rerouting decision has been slowed by batch synchronization within the enterprise system. A customer onboarding initiative has been blocked because integrations needed months and months of modification. So now, this is not an IT inconvenience anymore. It has actually become a business execution constraint. And to be very frank, this is the moment many boards and boards of directors of the companies begin paying attention. I mean, the attention, I mean, I don't want to be critical here, but then when technology teams actually describe the architecture, right, the board doesn't take much notice, right? They take notice only when revenue timing, operational agility, or customer experience, or even decision velocity gets affected. This is where CTOs have a huge role to play. And let me just put it very directly to the audience. In the last 12 months, can any of you think of a specific business decision that ERP either slowed down or outright blocked? Right. So nobody has answered, which usually means that the enterprise has normalized the friction so deeply that it no longer even questions it. Had there been some responses, right, we would have known that the organization already knows where pressure is building. And the third question in the list of the six questions is integration debt. And this is where things become operationally extremely dangerous for business very, very quickly. How many ERP integrations are undocumented, duplicated, or effectively not owned by anybody else? If you ask this question, many of the mid-sized, we did as part of QKS, we did ask this question to a lot of organizations, right? Most of the mid-sized and large enterprises were not able to answer this precisely. They didn't have a clue in terms of how many of their ERP integrations are documented, duplicated, reused, or not reused, or owned, unowned. And this inability itself is the diagnostic, because you cannot govern what you cannot describe. You cannot improve what you cannot measure. I even sometimes joke that integration layers and large enterprises behave like city traffic systems, right? Nobody fully understands why all the roads exist anymore, but everyone is terrified to about the closed one. Okay, and somewhere in the middle of that architecture, there is usually one integration maintained by one person who retired emotionally 3 years ago. Okay, so this is not platform governance. This is an operational dependency risk which can ruin the business. Okay, the fourth question is platform readiness. Can critical cross-functional workflows execute without the ERP mediating every single standoff or handoff? In this case, it has to be standoff, but yeah. So handoff. So this is the real test, because if ERP sits in the middle of every operational interaction, the enterprise may have modern applications, APIs, cloud infrastructure, and AI pilots, but then architecturally, the organization is still functioning like a legacy system, that to a centralized legacy system. The platform shift only and only begins when orchestration becomes independent of individual application boundaries. That is when workflows become uncomposable, which is what Sujan effectively explained during his presentation of the earlier slide. And this is when agility becomes a structural layer rather than a project-based, right? And the fifth question is my area of interest, AI readiness. We usually smile whenever we touch this topic. So, and this is where the market currently has the highest amount of confusion, if I can put it that way. AI readiness is equal to highest amount of confusion in the market. So the question is, can the analytics teams, AI teams, or data science teams access ERP data without building custom extraction work for every new use case? If the answer is no, then the organization does not actually have an AI problem. It has a data architecture problem. And no, none of the vendors, no AI vendor in the market can solve a data architecture problem with a chatbot, right? Because intelligence is only as effective as the accessibility, governance, and activation layer beneath it. Many organizations are trying to implement AI on top of fragmented enterprise architectures, and that is where they go wrong. So if they are trying to implement AI on top of these fragmented enterprise architectures, it is more like trying to install autonomous driving into a vehicle where the steering wheel is connected by Bluetooth. If you could imagine, your steering wheel in the car is connected to your car by Bluetooth. So that's how it is if you're building AI on top of the enterprise architecture. And finally, the last question, or the last title, is governance. Is governance enforced through policy, or is it enforced through code, or is it enforced through customization? This is a very, very important question, because code-based governance will not allow you to scale well when it comes to platform ecosystems. Every time this governance logic is deeply entered into custom code, agility slows down. Your upgrades get impacted. Every single exception that comes in becomes very expensive. Every policy adjustment becomes a project. So when it comes to platform architectures, governance increasingly move towards policy layers, orchestration rules, access models, and composable controls. And this is what is called playing by the rules. This is what is called governance. And this is what will allow you to scale without freezing innovation. So let me close this slide with one important point. These 6 questions that we just discussed are not transformation activities. These are actually the sequencing mechanisms, because the organizations that move successfully into platform operating models are usually the ones spending the most money. And they are the ones who are diagnosing the starting point correctly. And with that, let me close with the mandate itself. 3 decisions that will determine whether CTOs in this room, I mean, as part of our many participants in this webinar, lead this platform shift, or eventually you're finding yourself responding to it after the business has already moved ahead. So let's move to slide 9, the last slide. And let me close with what QKS Group believe is the real mandate for CTO organizations going into 2026. Because when I say what QKS believes, we speak from the data that have been collected through multiple models, multiple data collection models, multiple interactions with the end users, multiple interactions with the C-level leaders who's part of our various different communities, right? So because and so I would like to close this with the real mandate, because this ERP platform conversation is happening a lot inside all of these enterprises. In fact, many of these business functions have already started having this conversations independently. The finance department has started asking, why is my reporting taking this long? Operations have started questioning, why does every process change I request is becoming an IT program? And AI teams, the best ones, they are asking, why is the data still inaccessible for production grade intelligence? And now comes the board. The business leadership is actually asking a much broader question. Why does enterprise execution still feels slower than enterprise ambition? So the question is, does this conversation even reach the leadership table? It already has. The the actual question is our CTO coming to the table with the platform framework or with another project proposal? And that distinction matters enormously. This is the difference between a CTO getting to manage an enterprise system and govern an enterprise system, because ERP itself is not the problem. ERP has remained, is remaining, and will remain as one of the most operationally important systems inside an enterprise. The issue is where the enterprises are treating the ERP as as the platform itself. And this has happened gradually. Over years, organizations have kept adding responsibilities into ERP, because ERP is already central, it's trusted, already governed. It is more like, I mean, on a lighter note, so I see that Anish is an effective employee. So I consider him as my doctor when I fall ill. I consider him as my mechanic when my bike breaks down. I consider him as my financial advisor when the share markets are going down. It's like, no, Anish is not built for that, right? So when the organizations tried adding or kept adding more responsibilities, orchestrations moved in, integrations moved in, workflow logic moved in, analytics expectations moved in. Now, to top it all, AI expectations are moving in. So at some point, the ERP system quietly became expected to function like a transaction engine, a process orchestrator, a data platform, an integration layer, analytics hub, and increasingly the most unrealistic expectation. They are expected to behave like an AI operating environment. And all of this should happen before Monday morning. Okay, so today is Sunday. So that's how the enterprises are looking at it. So this is not architecture strategy. This is enterprise overloading. So mandate number one for 2026 for our CTOs is contain ERP. And I'm using this word contain very deliberately. Not about, what I'm talking about is not about reducing, not about weakening or not replacing ERP. Contain your ERP. ERP should focus on what it has been designed for. Right? So ERP is designed to exceptionally do very well when it comes to transaction processing, compliance, financial integrity, audit governance, or operational consistency. Those are mission critical responsibilities for an ERP. But at this point in time, we are simultaneously asking the ERP to carry on orchestration and then the integration governance and real-time activation, AI enablement, intelligence, composable execution. And what happens is the system begins degrading across all of these functions. A platform model succeeds because ERP becomes clearer in purpose. So if you have noticed, we've been using clarity multiple times, clearer multiple times, because that clarity is your roadmap. So mandate number one is contain your ERP. And mandate number two is build above the ERP layer, not inside it. You are weakening the system if you're building inside the ERP layer. And enterprises have to really think very differently about investment priorities, right? It has to be integration governance and data accessibility, workflow orchestration, AI management, intelligence layers. You cannot look at all of these as temporary transformation activities anymore. These are there to be part of your permanent enterprise infrastructure. And the word permanent is extremely important because many ERP transformations fail to sustain value after go live only for one reason. If the enterprise treats the integration and orchestration as project deliverables, they will fail because integration and orchestration are part of operational infrastructure. So the program closes, the system integrator partner exits, the dashboards look excellent for about 6 weeks. And then suddenly someone requests a cross-functional process change and everybody in the organization will rediscover spirituality, right? Because now the organization realizes that the architecture was modernized, but not structurally redesigned. So this is why platform thinking matters. And platform, you cannot treat the platform as a project outcome. It's an operating model. And the final mandate, diagnostic comes before vendor. This is the most important sequencing decision of everything that we discussed. The 6 questions that we discussed, right, that will define the gaps. The gaps define the transformation sequence. The sequence defines the architecture, and only then vendor positioning discussions become primary. It's not the other way around. Any organization that reverses this sequence will end up with very expensive modernization programs that successfully migrate the system while leaving the structural bottlenecks completely intact. Right? These organizations modernize the interface, but doesn't give attention to the operating model. The execution architecture is the one that needs to be modernized. And if the organizations don't do this right, 3 years later, the enterprise will still ask the same questions on a newer, better looking interface because nothing underneath has changed. Right? So let me just close with this thought. ERP has never been the problem. It is not a problem. It will never be a problem if it is okay. The problem is actually treating ERP as the platform is. So the CTO mandate for 2026 is to separate those two things very clearly. Build the governance model that reflects the distinction and lead that conversation at the level it deserves. So thank you very much for
Thank
your
you so
time.
much, Sanjeev. Thank you
With the
so
right
much for taking us through that. It was indeed a very thought-provoking session. In fact, I'm sure just listening to you, I myself I did enjoy the way you portrayed ERP. It feels very special to listen to you. Anyway, we have a couple of questions received from the audience today, and I don't think I'll be able to ask all these questions today since we are running short of time. But I'll just take up 2 questions that has come up the earliest, which is nothing but, is this not a composable CRP vendor have been selling us over the past few years? Did you guys understand what that meant by the question? So I'll
Yeah. Yes, got it.
yeah.
And Sujan, you want that or should I?
Sanjay, you can take it.
Thank you. So the answer to the question, Anish, is yes. Composable ERP vendors have been absolutely selling this vision for years. The most interesting part is that many enterprises successfully implemented composable technology while keeping the same centralized governance model. So now they have a distributed architecture with centralized bottlenecks. In other words, if I would put it, I would say the systems have become modular, but the approval process will still need 7 meetings, 3 committees, and someone will have to return from vacation to approve. So that's what I mean when I say the system has become centralized governance, okay, a distributed architecture. So that's how it is.
Well, I'll ask a scenario-based question that has come up. Thanks for answering that, by the way, Sanjeevi. I'll just ask this last one question as we are running short of time.
Sure.
Are they the person has mentioned, I believe it has been asked by Jemmy. So she's asking that her ERP is on the latest cloud version. Does that dilemma you describe still apply to them?
Yeah, so I take that question.
Mhm.
So here, see, our conversation around ERP wasn't around whether the ERP is in the cloud or somewhere else, right? It's not a deployment related problem here. If the 3 structural problems still exist in the cloud, that is the customization debt, right? What we talked about, the integration fragility, and the AI readiness. So if the question is how the system is governed and extended and not about where it is running. So even if you are on the latest cloud, doesn't mean that your problems at the integration layer, at the data layer have automatically been solved, right? So you have to look at managing the architecture, like we have talked about in this multiple times, that it's not about the vendor. So moving on to the latest version of cloud is a vendor problem, vendor conversation. We are talking about the change in the CTO mandate, the CTO responsibility, right? So addressing these 3 problems is the CTO's problems, and it is an internal problem. So if that is effectively solved, then it doesn't matter where your where your ERP is. So what basically you have right now done, if you have not solved those 3 problems, is basically taking those problems from on-premise to the cloud, right?
Thank you for answering that, Sujan. I hope, Jemmy, you also received your answer. Well, as we are running short of time, I would to all those unanswered questions, we'll surely revert back to them via mail. So as we conclude today's session, I'd like to sincerely thank all of you for joining us and being a part of today's discussion. Sanjeevi and Sujan has been very special in highlighting ERP in 2026, that it is no longer a system of records, but rather it is becoming a strategic enterprise platform that must support agility, intelligence, integration, and scalable execution across the business. Once again, a special thanks to Sanjeevi and Sujan for sharing valuable insights and practical perspectives. And to all those attendees, thank you for your time, your engagement, and your questions. Do stay updated to the latest research, the VOC reports that Sanjeevi mentioned, the upcoming webinars, and do follow us on LinkedIn at QKS Group and visit us at qksgroup.com. We look forward to having you in our upcoming sessions. Once again, thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.